Wow.
Hey, pura vida, everybody. Thanks for tuning in right now. I know it's late for some of you. For me, it's only 10 o'clock. I'm like on mountain time, I guess. We don't change our clocks over here at all. But wanted to say thank you for tuning in. Shout out to everybody in the chat. I see all the names there. Thank you for tuning in. All the real ones out here. Scholars, all those who want, just learn and get the info. Put all personal beliefs and feelings aside, and let's just try to make sense of everything, And on my last live, I was working, I was traveling, had a filming gig. I do some filming production sometimes, and I don't know what happened. As soon as I connected, all of a sudden the hotel internet just dropped, and so just disconnected me. I guess there was too much info. I'm not gonna go over the info we went over in part 2, which I got disconnected, couldn't get back. But I want to mention something we didn't really talk about in part 2. That good, because I know I was breaking up a lot, and it was getting blurry at times and all that. So just wanted to go over some of that info. Thought it was very important. Little connection there that I kind of didn't realize until I rewatched it again. I'm like, oh, thought, All right, so shout out to everybody that's tuned in. Thanks for being here. We're just waiting for something to come. Everybody in the chat, thank you for the support. Much love and respect to Kaloa Flower Power. Thank you for the donation. Appreciate it very much. We're gonna just go over some info we kind of went over in the first part. This part right here, again, just to remind everybody, I'm not gonna go over the same thing. We know Sephardic, Jews, Muslim Moors. We know these are people of color mostly. We know. We're not gonna pretend these are all white people. We got primary sources letting us know a general consensus that these were, swarthy Europeans. All right. As it says here, as Protestantism swept across Western Europe, many of these Jewish conversos and Moriscos became often only outwardly Protestant. All right. They were just Protestant outwardly. They were not really Protestant, or what you call Christians. And why didn't they ever become fully Catholics? Because they weren't. They were Sephardic Jews and Muslim Moors under this banner of Protestantism, only outwardly. Remember, these are crypto Jewish conversos, and Moriscos. What is a Morisco again? Wikipedia says the Spanish Moor, Morisco. Morisco are those who converted to Christianity. That's a Morisco from Muslims who converted to Christianity. So they were what? Pretending to be what? Protestant, swelling the ranks of the dissenters. What is a dissenter? Meaning you dissed the religion, you dissented and you turned Christian, dissenters. A lot of them had to do it by force, we know it, in order to survive. Some even provided leaders for the Huguenots. Oh, really? Some provided leaders for the Huguenots. And who's the Huguenots? Huguenots were also, when the Moors got expelled from Spain, they ended up in the south of France, a lot of them, and became known as Huguenots. Huguenot is a political term, not a religious term. A coming together, a confederation of people, taking a confederation, becoming a confederation, taking an oath, comrades. Huguenots, organized, political, not religious, under Calvinism, right? What did we get in part 1 of this series? Calvin. Who was John Calvin? He was a crypto Jew. Calvin goes back to Cohen. It all connects. It's all family. They got all these tags. Calvinists, Huguenots, and as it says here, they also provided leaders for the Hussites. We're talking about people of color here, Sephardic Jews, Muslim Moors, providing people as leaders or becoming known as what? Huguenots, Hussites, Anabaptists, Calvinists, German Reformed, Walloons, Mennonites, Dunkers, Quakers, Puritans, and Presbyterians. When the British, Dutch, and French began establishing colonies on the Atlantic seaboard, they sent as colonists not subjects of high political and social rank from their respective countries, but for the most part recently arrived, patently anti-Catholic, newly minted Protestants. Many were debtors, prisoners or servants, indentured servants, prisoners of war, debtors, you owe me, cast-offs of society, undesirables. Remember what was going on with undesirables. We got my videos, bound, in a real middle passage, talking about indentured servitude across the Atlantic, talking about hundreds of thousands of Europeans being bounded over, a lot of them by force, as we're reading here, as prisoners or servants, castles of society who were struggling to get onto their own feet in a new country. They were just in these places, still trying to adapt. We're talking about in Ireland, England, Holland, Germany. The word refugee was first used for these people, the Huguenots. They were persecuted all over Europe. So when we talk about freedom of religion or persecution, freedom of religion coming over to America from freedom of religion, what kind of religion? And why aren't they letting you practice this? Because again, they were only outwardly Protestant or Christians. They were Sephardic Jews and Muslims. Hope you guys are following me. All right, so we actually, in the last video that I got interrupted, we read this part about England and how, they were bringing a lot of these Spanish Jews and Muslim Moors over there. Very important. They've taken over a lot of good jobs, banking, the ports, the commerce, the metalworking, the smiths. All right, they gave us a couple of names. One in particular I wanted to emphasize that I read over here, right? This says, not only did Moors travel to England on business, but some even decided to stay, converting to Anglicanism. They converted to Anglicanism and marrying English women. In 1625, official records show 3 of 4 Turks or Moors in Exeter, 30 in Plymouth, 3 or 4 in Bristol, and 10 with Baronet Seymour. We already know Bristol was a free person. I don't know how they will call it in England, but so-called Swarthy, a major Swarthy population there in Bristol. Come to find out, a lot of Sephardic Jews and Moors there, running the ports too. Supposed to be a big slave port. And who's the people running it? Same people we're reading about. A lot of these people from Bristol were sent to the islands and the plantations in Virginia. I got a whole book listing all the names and where they were sent, how many years, who were they bound to, coming out of Bristol. We're supposed to assume all these people that ended up in plantations, right? We're talking about tobacco, sugar plantations in the Caribbean, in Virginia, in the Carolinas, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, all these places, Florida, Georgia. You're telling me all these people were so-called white? When they got these surnames right here, where they're about to let you know. Those Moorish names documented in England at the time are Hamid from Muhammad. Hamid is Muhammad. Mansur, Mansur. Mustain, Mustan. Musan. Ali, Ali. Muhammad Ali, Ali. Alu, Aleph. Walid, Walid. Wali, Wali. Rich, Wali. Balu, Balu, Bello. All right, so we went over this in the last video. One that stood out to me was Dodds and Dodo, Dodds, Doden, Dodds, and Wally, because I remember Walid, Wally, Dodds. That sounds like somebody in the Nation of Islam. Could he be a Sephardic Jew? Just want to go over some. Let's see if we can get this link. 1 second. Okay. All right, so shout out to the Autonomous Party group. I got this from the chat. They shared a lot of good information. Shout out to the group there. All right, so it says here, what does it say? Black Muslim founder exposed as white. White? Dodd served time in Quentin as dope peddler. Who's Dodd? Who's this guy? Who's this? Oh, that's Elijah, and that's W.D. Ford, right? Or AKA Wallace Dodd or Ford. Ed Montgomery's infamous 1963 LA Herald's Examiner article alleging W.D. Ford is really Wallace Dodd Ford, ex-felon and drug dealer, photo and write that of Wallace Dodd. You know, Wallace Dodd. Right? Dodd. Wallace Dodd right here. Dodd is Sephardic Moorish name, right? We know that, all right? So that's not a white guy. He may be a little bit light-skinned, yeah. He might be light-skinned, you know, tending towards more the pale, whatever his genealogy mixture is. But yeah, it's definitely a Sephardic Moorish name. We actually went over this, I believe, in my series, No More Misunderstanding, right? Controversial series, but it wasn't really intended to be that way. But it's in controversial information, I know. A lot of personal feelings involved. Okay. But let me just show you guys something here. We went over this book in that series, which was Noble Drew Ali. Let's see, let me show you guys. And the Moor Science Temple Movement. Right, this was written by Herbert H. Booker T. It was one of his dissertations for his master's. Right, in university, we have a different version with the degree and everything in it. So you can verify all the info in it. You don't have to believe the guy, just verify the info in it. All right, we had a lot of good info on this. Just want to read this part right here. It says the study is intended to shed new light on the life of teacher Noble Drew Ali. All right, again, we're not here to attack anybody, we're just reading. Drew Ali by providing information previously unavailable. The purpose of this monograph is to explore the history of the private development of the Moorish Science Temple of America, and it goes blah blah blah. Right, so down here it says Drew Ali had a unique position as a religious leader in the rich and diverse history of African Americans, and influence other African American religious leaders, including Father Divine, W.D. Ford, Elijah Muhammad, so Father Divine, right? In the United States since 1870, it was found that 10% of the settlers of Muhammad Township and the adjoining township had family surnames which would suggest Islamic influence, perhaps names remembered by former slaves taken prisoner in Islamic African nations. Now, look how they tried to explain why these people have Moorish Islamic surnames. They said perhaps they took it from their Islamic masters. Same story, right? Just like they're telling your last name is from a white master. But we know the truth now. We know we're dealing with colonial times, and who's over here? Majority. We're dealing with Sephardic Jews, Muslim Moors. A lot of them coming in as Huguenots, as Calvinists, as Protestants, as New Christians, whatever you want to tag them as, so-called white. Right? That's how they get their surnames, because that is their surnames. That is their Islamic surnames. Among those with Islamic names were those who had names from the Fulani ethnic groups in Africa, says the name Fardi recalls the name of the founder of the Nation of Islam, W.D. Fard, who perhaps was Arabic origin. By the time of the United States Census 1880, almost all the people with Arabic names disappeared from the listing of the Champaign County Directory. They disappeared, and they did not appear in the telephone books of Chicago. The story of the Nation of Islam cannot be considered incomplete in itself. Militant and cultist movements among migrant African Americans in the cities of the North have formed a sort of tree. After one branch has grown, flourished, and begun to decay, another shoots up to begin over again, the same cycle over and over. All right, so now again, opinion, all right, from among the larger groups of Muslims were sprang recently an even more militant branch which identified the Prophet W.D. Fard with the God Allah and raised to the rank of Prophet the former minister of Islam, Elijah Muhammad. Right? We just again just kind of briefing through this. Now, further on, it says when Noble Drew Ali left Newark for Chicago in 1925, he gave his reason the opinion that the Midwest was closer to Islam. He might have been referring to the Egyptian shrines, but he also might have the Ishmaels, or both. Now, we're going to do a future video on the Ishmael tribe in the Americas and how they were, who they were, and how they were mixing with Plains Indians, called Plains Indians. Yeah, they were living among them in the so-called, right? And it was towards the west of, Chicago, and all those places. Those are west, so it was closer to Islam, I guess. And they did have a lot of Egyptian shrines, but the Ishmaels were also known to be there. An Ishmael woman with the delightfully nomadic name was Gallivan, passed down a tradition that Ishmaelites were among Drew Ali's first converts in the area. Other reasons are given for the move to Chicago: that the Moors were persecuted for refusing conscription during World War I, or that Drew Ali was discomforted by the appearance of a Russo-Syrian peddler of silks and raincoats named Abdul Wali Farad Muhammad Ali, who began to lure some of the Moors away to his own brand of Islam, closer to the Arabic model, but apparently tainted with race hatred. The white man was described as a blue-eyed devil. All right, so again, the person who wrote this is a so-called white man, so he might, have a personal way of saying things when he's writing this, right? Oh, race hatred, yeah. Well, they had their reasons, right? And are you completely innocent? All right. This may or may not be the same Wallace Fard, Wallace Fard, who later, according to Moorish legend, convinced Elijah Muhammad to leave Moorish science and set up his own nation of Islam, the Black Muslims. But whatever Drew Ali's reasons, Chicago proved far more hospitable than Newark, and the Moorish science of America entered its golden age. One theory supports that Wally Farad, imprisoned in 1926, was replaced by one Wallace Douglas Dodd Ford. Hear this. Douglas Dodd Ford, here you go. A communist agent sent to mislead and arouse the African Americans. Elijah Muhammad claimed that Fard was Allah himself. Fard is a name in Arabic meaning the unique. When Ford was in turn arrested in 1933, he is said to have confessed that his cult was strictly a racket. After that, he too vanished mysteriously. Now, I know this sounds like, oh, somebody's going after somebody, and this is not, I'm just reading again, but when you do the research regarding art, right, they really, say he's a lie, and yeah, he just disappeared. He doesn't exist anymore. He just like walked with God, I guess, like Enoch, right? That's like real stories. I mean, you cannot, there's a controversial history behind him, and I got a future video. All right, we'll see what all the info is, and we let the info and the history talk for itself. When Ford was in turn arrested in 1933, he is said to have confessed that his cult was racket. Another theory states that Ford was a member of the Moorish Science Temple, who, after the death of Noble Drew Ali, claimed, like many others, to be his reincarnation, and that he himself founded the Nation of Islam. I'm informed by Prince Kuba in a letter of 1399 that Isa al-Mahdi has apologized for his claims against Fard. Prince Kuba makes a good argument for dismissing the communist agent theory as disinformation. The story that Fard was a disciple of Noble Drew Ali, however, is harder to discredit. It received some support from an article in the Chicago Daily Tribune, March 6, 1935, describing a courtroom riot involving followers of W.D. Fard, or Ford, Muhammad Ford, described as members of the Moorish order and specifically linked to the Moorish Science Temple. All right. So, again, we're going off topic here, but I just wanted you to guys to kind of see that it all connects, goes complete circle. Dodd, Dodd, who's this Dodd? This guy, right? The Dodd family is in here. So when I was reading this on the last video, I was like, I know that name. And I know Wally, Wally Dodd. Wallace Dodd. Okay. But that's a real person. You can't tell me, show me a birth certificate for WD Fard. You know, this is not just in this saying to talk bad. I'm just saying let's try to be historic with this, you know, or are we just gonna be like, you know, it's Jesus? Just same thing. Anybody can just say I'm Jesus, you know, but you know, I guess to each his own, respect anyways. You know, I try to not be religious, but I try to go with history and sources and what we can kind of like at least correlate with the different info that we come across to make a truer story, to try to connect more dots, and instead of all these dead ends that we've been running into all our lives because of the same people keep teaching us these old un, un info that's not updated. You know, it's like stuck in 1993 or something. I don't know. I just feel like it is. All right, but we're gonna continue. Again, I just want to mention that. Right, again, future video. I don't just talk and show things because I'm gonna show you guys. All right, so we gotta go, or we're just gonna go with beliefs. Another thing we talked about in this part of the Phoenicians might have ended up there was the Phoenicians, and what else? Queen Elizabeth's alliance with, you know, Muslims and Morocco and all that. We talked about this in the last video. I want to emphasize that too. All right, so the secret history of Elizabeth's alliance with Islam. This is from National Geographic. You can take a look at that. All right, Anglo-Moroccan alliance was established at the end of the 16th century and early 17th century between the kingdoms of England and Morocco. Commercial agreements had been reached by Queen Elizabeth I of England and the Moroccan Sultan Ahmad el Mansour. Now you got to understand the history because you got to dodge the hijack big time. I want you guys to pay attention. They're showing us two pale-skinned people right here. She was Protestant mainly, and we already know he's a, you know, they most likely didn't look like this. So dodge the hijack because these were most likely swarthy. Based on the history and who these people are and their families, we know these were people of color. So dodge the hijack. That's why it doesn't make sense to us. But these alliances go past just countries. There's family ties here, there's culture, there's same religion persecution, these people being persecuted by the Catholics. They had the same enemy. Queen Elizabeth was before King James. King James was Catholic. Remember King James Version? Catholic. All right. And that's why Oliver Cromwell, who was more with Queen Elizabeth, he was eventually a Protestant, all these. So they got the Jacobites out. So there's a whole history here. And we got to understand it's more and more war. More and more war. Portrait of the Moorish ambassador to Queen Elizabeth. British Library. Hijack. This imposing oil painting shows the Moroccan ambassador who visited London in late 1600s. Abdullah Ben Masoud Ben Mohammed Al Noun was part of the delegation of 17 men sent by the King of Barbary, a huge expanse of North Africa, which includes modern-day Morocco. The group came to negotiate with Queen Elizabeth I about the possibility of military alliance combining English and African forces to conquer Spain. Now, don't get it wrong. These ain't countries coming together. Spain was under Catholic rule at the time they're making this alliance. They have a common enemy, persecuted Sephardic Jewish and Muslim people. When we say English and African, you got to dodge the hijack big time. It's all tags. You guys understanding what I'm saying? I hope you guys do. All right. So, back to the book. All right. So that was what kind of we emphasized on those two parts of that, which was getting very choppy. We were getting disconnected. And we left off with Sir Walter Raleigh. We're going to continue right here. It says here, Sir Walter Raleigh. I guess before we continue, in case, because I assume everybody knows who Sir Walter Raleigh is, right? So, I mean, let me just, simple common knowledge, because I know a lot of people say, Kurimeo, you shouldn't use Wikipedia. I don't just use Wikipedia, but there's things that are common knowledge you can verify. Not everything in Wikipedia is fake. You can actually edit and put in real sources. If you go to the bottom, it has citations and footnotes. Some of these are very scholarly. BBC, Great Britain's, Walter Raleigh's biography, the Biography Channel, the Smithsonian Institute, the Lost Colony of Roanoke. All right, so, you know, that's your own hijack and verify the info on your own. So again, we're going with common knowledge. Who do they tell us not touch the hijack with all these whitewashed paintings? Okay. What is it? Who is Walter Raleigh, supposedly? Also spelled Raleigh. All right, Raleigh. Why is that important? Remember Raleigh. Raleigh was an English statesman, soldier, spy, writer, poet, explorer, and landed gentleman. So was he really English? Pay attention to what the hijack. One of the most notable figures of the Elizabethan era, he played a leading part in English colonization of North America. Again, he played what? A leading part. Very important person. He wasn't white, guys. I'm going to show you who he was. Suppressed rebellion in Ireland and helped defend England during the Spanish Armada and held political positions under Elizabeth I. All right? Who's in alliance with Morocco, right? Anglo-Moroccan alliance. Full circle. Raleigh was born to a Protestant family. Who's the Protestants? You see, it was always right in front of us, but we just didn't understand what they meant when they were talking about Protestants, right? Sephardic, all these things. Huguenots. Protestant, right? Protestant. Who's the Protestants? We ain't gonna go over this again, right? Who's the Protestants? We already know. The son of Walter Raleigh and Catherine Champernon, and a cousin of Sir Richard Grenville, and younger half-brother of Sir Humphrey Gilbert. Little is known of his early life. Oh, they don't know his early life, right? Yeah, they don't want to tell you. Though in his late teens, he spent some time in France. Oh, France, who were you there? With the Huguenots, taking part in the religious civil wars. Who was under religious civil wars? Let me show you. It's a full circle. I need you guys to understand. This is very simple. The French Wars of Religion were a prolonged period of war, popular unrest between Catholics and who? Huguenots. Reformed Calvinist Protestants. Calvin was a Sephardic Jew. We got that in the first part, right? Now, where are we going to go read? So, again, Walter Raleigh, who's English, why is he helping the Huguenots? Why is Walter Raleigh, the English, helping the Huguenots? Is he that determined to help all his Protestant religious brothers so they can fight in religious arms? Who's the Huguenots? This is the book History of the Conquest of Spain by the Arab Moors, with the sketch of the civilization which they achieved and impaired to Europe by Henry Copy. This is from 1892. All right. All right, come on, internet, and play with us. Walter Raleigh, or as we're gonna see, De la Raleigh. De la Raleigh. All right. So, who's the Huguenots? We're gonna go back like it's the first time. All right. We're gonna dodge all the hijack because there's a full circle, and repetition is good. Repetition is good. It says here, Christopher Columbus found in his name the claim of his first great duty. Loyal to his sovereigns, he was the Christ bearer. He was the Christ bearer. and the dove, the carrier dove of Christianity to the uttermost parts of the earth. All right, but check this out. So his name is a title. All right, what happened? His name is a title. Cristoforo is the Christ bearer. That's what it means in Latin. Right? And Columbus and all that, that's also Columbia, that's a god, that's all added stuff. Not Cologne either. It says that, but from his Christian Spain, he brought without intending it only evil to the Aborigines. Right? We're talking about a person of color, Sephardic Jew, Portuguese Sephardic Jew. His real name, Salvador Fernandez Sarco, is what we're starting to lean towards. Future video, we're going to try to really prove this. Shout out to Topcast for connecting all the dots on that part right there. It was the inquisition of a fierce propaganda. It was grinding labor. It was cruelty, which could only end an extermination of the natives. What he dispensed of Moorish civilization was only good. All right, Moorish civilization was good in the eyes of Christopher Columbus. Why? If he's the Christ bearer. The inventions and discoveries they had introduced, his vessel was fitted out in that little port of Palos, which had lately been a Moorish port. His sailors were many of them men with Moorish blood in their veins. It has been asserted that when the Moors were driven out, thousands took refuge in the south of France, who afterwards, abhorring the Roman Catholic persecutions, became Huguenots. What became what? A confederation. They became comrades. They took an oath. And that of these, many emigrated at a later date to South Carolina. You got any genealogy in South Carolina? We're talking about people of color here. We're not talking about any light-skinned person or that may look or pass as black, or that skin, white person or that has a tan. No, we're talking about actual so-called Negro people. All right. So let's go back. Walter Raleigh, right? He was helping in the religious civil wars of France, helping who? The Huguenots, his family, his Moorish family, Sephardic Moorish family. All right. It keeps going. There's a lot of history behind him. Now, before we read his history, so you can be able to dodge the hijack when you're reading it, we're going to see who he really is and what we can, correlate. Now it says Sir Walter Raleigh. Now, first of all, I don't think I mentioned it I don't think I mentioned it. We're reading from Jews and Muslims in British Colonial America. Fair use. This is for education and commentary. Also, the gig is up. It's time to let go of the info. You can't hold on to it anymore. Sorry, game over. But thank you, Elizabeth Hirschman and Donald Jace, for bringing out this great book. Appreciate all the research you guys did. We really appreciate you connecting the dots for us here. We really appreciate you guys. Okay. Let's go back to where we were. And it says Walter Raleigh from 1552 to 1680. Walter Raleigh's earliest known ancestors is believed to be Simon, Hebrew name, Simone, a Hebrew name. De Raleigh, also a town in Devonshire, De Raleigh. He was born in 1195 in Devon and was reportedly a merchant. So they're talking about his ancestor, a merchant. Who's the merchant? Remember, man, Nations of the World series. Who's the merchant? We broke that down. Even from ancient times, who was the merchant? Silk routes and all that. Trading in ancient times, who's the real merchant? When we're talking about merchants in your genealogy, in the 1800s, he was a merchant named Benjamin Williams. His son named Isaac, and then his son is Jacob. So you see the trend. I hope you guys have seen the trend too when you're doing your genealogy. So what are these people really? Are they just white people? You think they were just white people that you had in your genealogy, huh? Gosh, the hijack big time. Not on your fault. It's not our fault. But now that we know or have a better clue, we need to really relook at things. We need to include all our lines. Evidently, like many other families, the Raleighs were Anglo-Norman, right? Normans. Who's the Normans? We broke this down in part one, I think. That forebears came over from France with William the Conqueror. In recent generations, they married Chapernaunds from Campernon in Normandy. Drakes and the daughter of the Genoese Italy merchant family whose name is unknown. Sir Walter's mother was by descent a Champernoun, and Carew, Cornish. That's the hijack with the images here, because according to this person, Sephardic people were white, you know. By an early marriage, she bore, well, these are the actual only paintings of these people that you find, you know, these whitewashed paintings. So, but when they're writing, they know who they're writing about. We're going to show you. It says, by an earlier marriage, she bore three sons, John Humphrey and Adrian Gilbert. Raleigh's brother-in-law and cousin was Sir Richard Grenville, a cousin also to Drake. All right. His cousin is Francis Drake. They're actually cousins. They're family. These families were not only heavily intermarried, generation to generation, but also implicated in settling colonial America. The Champernowns, Raleighs, Gilberts, Drakes, Carews were ardent Protestants. All right, Protestants, Drakes, Raleighs, Gilberts, Carews, Protestants by the late 1500s. But before that, they were, we suggest, in varying degrees, crypto Jews. Again, crypto Jews in various degrees. Who? Raleigh and Francis Drake. They were people of Jewish heritage, mutually recognized, who had begun to dissemble their roots and religion since the forced conversion of English Jews under Edward I in 1290, all the way back in those times. Sephardic Moorish people were being persecuted. Right? That's when it all started in England. As can be seen in portraits, the Raleigh, Drakes, and Gilberts were uniformly dark. They were what? Dark, with prominent noses. So why are you showing us a white guy here? You see what I was saying? They know what these people look like, but again, shout out, and let me just go back to it. I know, you know, make sure we get this. All right, we're gonna get a true depiction of Sir Francis Drake. Shout out to Troy Johnson. Much love and respect, brother. This is a copyrighted painting. Make sure you guys don't share or use it, because you will get, yeah, he's Troy's gonna be on yo. You know what? All right. He was kind enough to share with me. You know, we only trying to use this to help our people or everybody understand, you know, through history, help break spells, because we keep seeing, again, we're gonna go back. We keep seeing whitewashed images. That puts a whole spell on you straight up. And I know people are, nah, that doesn't work on me, but it actually subliminally does, because you don't, nobody's talking about this. Man, nobody talking about this. Shout out to Topcast and Tracy McCarthy, I guess, or McGrady, whatever her name is. Sorry, don't really let you that after you slandered me, but it's okay. I respect. I like some of your videos, but you know, again, we got to break the spell, because they're telling us that the Drakes, the Raleighs were uniformly dark with prominent noses. Uniformly dark with prominent noses. Shout out to Troy again, man. He got, and you guys don't know, Troy's gonna change history. Troy's paintings is gonna be all over soon, the world. Shout out to Troy Johnson, man. Now it says here that, okay, it says not unlike Iberian and Moroccan Jews. Prominent noses, high foreheads, and narrow faces, not unlike Iberian and Moroccan Jews. Just like them, not unlike them, but just like them. And aside on Genoese Jews, a Jewish mercantile family from Genoa, who had connections both in the Low Countries and royal court in England under the Tudor monarchs, were the Anthonys or Antons. The earliest of these was a goldsmith and wind instrument player brought to London by Henry VIII. John Anthony, also known as Antonius Moises. He was one of the 20 Jews who were court musicians. A descendant, Mark Antony, was sent to school in Italy by his father, but ran away, was captured by Algerian pirates, and sold into slavery in Algiers. Who? We're talking about people of color. More and more war. The captain of British ships took pity on him, carried him to America, and resolved him to pay for his passage in 1698. How did he pay for his passage? Through an indenture, most likely. A farmer in New Kent County, Virginia, bought him for 3 years. There you go. Bought him for 3 years. No, he bound him for 3 years. The young man, so he wasn't a slave for life, right? Only 3 years. The young man ended up establishing a trading post, marrying Isabella Hart of a leading Jewish trader family in Virginia, while his son Joseph married Elizabeth Park of another Jewish mercantile company. Now, I just want to emphasize something here, very important. I've done people's genealogy and I found this same pattern. An indentured servant gets freed, marries another prominent, what seems to be, appears to be more Sephardic family or person. Again, keeping it in the family. Remember, these people kept it in the family. All right. A granddaughter, Sarah Clark Anthony, married a Thomas Cooper, grandson of a crypto-Jewish London merchant. Crypto-Jewish merchant, Cooper, crypto-Jewish merchant, and son of an Indian trader. Boom. There you go. And what does their kids become? So-called Negro, so-called Black, so-called African American. The son of a crypto-Jewish merchant and an Indian trader. You guys understand? How many genealogies you got? Do we got to go back to the chart, the genealogical chart I showed the other day? How many grandmas you got by your 10th generation? How many grandfathers you got by your 11th generation? By your 8th generation? How many grandparents are you leaving out? How much history and culture? How much important? How many ancestors you're not honoring? Because you just like, nah, I'm not, I just want to, oh, my grandma just said, well, I'm gonna tell you something right now. Shout out to Mac. I just came from a great interview. I don't know if you guys saw the post on my wall. Shout out to Mac from the Autonomous Party who invited me to his podcast show on Mixcloud, and it was a great discussion and interview. I let him know, something to think about. Now, Grandma knew she was an African, right? She knew she was an African. She knows she was Indian, because that was always there, oral history and everything. Ain't no doubt, right? You may have heard, or somebody in the family said they might be Irish or English, but those are white people, right? So we don't pay too much attention to that, man. We just took their name, or, those are some, they mixed in and, they raped somebody, or somebody had a baby with somebody, and it wasn't like that. These were people of color too. We're leaving out ancestors. I want you guys to really understand that you're leaving out ancestors. Whether they were colonists, whether they were indentured servants, whether they were good or bad people, people are people. What was going on back then is people being people. So I'm sure that if we had a correct history growing up, if our grandparents and everybody else knew that there was Europeans of color, we might have kind of held on to that European side of tradition that was being told to us too, and said, well, these were people of color. Well, then you might have kind of like connected more. Remember, these are clans. These people have coat of arms. These people, some of them royal knights, all this stuff. We're talking about merchants, people controlling rich people, very prominent history. You're leaving a lot of history. And a lot of these people were very unfortunate too. They weren't just colonists or conquistadors. They were going through a real middle passage. Work, fleeing their whatever religious persecution from the Catholics or whatever situation they were in. They were being deemed undesirables, poor, and all that, and they were being shipped by force a lot of times over in these tramp ships over here to the plantations, and they would have to pay for that through their indenture. So, there's a lot of history being left out of there. I find it in a lot of people's genealogy. Just think about that. Work on every line you got as much as you can. Always have this in mind. You'll start seeing patterns. Find out if these surnames are crypto Jews or Muslims maybe at one point, or if these are Protestant people, or and then you can go from there. But it's kind of all starts connecting. Just like I'm doing this presentation, I would find the exact same info right here on somebody's genealogy. And just to be clear, I did get to Francis Drake. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. I found somebody Drake related, and it was related to Francis Drake, and they were in the either Carolinas or what was it, or Virginia, but I think it was in the Carolinas, actually South Carolina. All right, so I know I went on a rant there. We're gonna continue. I just wanted to make sure you guys are following me. I don't want to just read and this information goes in and out, and we're like, why is Kurimeo talking about all these like Europeans? All these Europeans, Kurimeo, it's all foreigners, Kurimeo. It may be foreigners. You don't know how long they were in Europe. They might have come from America originally. Even if they didn't, if it's your family, right? I mean, all right, whatever, but it's okay. It's not your family. You're 100% Indian. Hey, congrats. You're the first one I've ever met. Thank you. And if there is one, I've never really met one, but hey, you're awesome. So we're going to continue with the book. We're talking about Walter Raleigh, his connection, his family, how they're moving around. Now we got into something very important, a crypto-Jewish merchant hooking up with an Indian, right? That happened. That's what I'm saying. These two genealogies, two major genealogies here. Think about that. So Cooper was a founding figure in American Freemasonry. That's in chapter 10. We're eventually going to get into that. Don't worry. We're going to try to get through this whole book. These Coopers are ancestors of both authors. So that's why they did this book, because they found their Sephardic. So that's another thing they bring me to. And I'm glad they mentioned that, because unknowingly, a lot of so-called white people, descend. Hold on, they descend from so-called black people. They don't even know it. I know because I see them attached to people of color when I'm doing people's genealogy, that they're assuming just because they're in the Civil War or because they had a farm and they were free, that these were white people, or because the census sometimes says white. You got to dodge the hijack big time on these census. Sometimes they're just labeling people of color white. They label Indians white. They label Indians mulatto. They label very dark-skinned people mulatto. So again, can't generalize. We just got to go case by case and see what's going on in that situation and try to see what's going on. Why they label them white? Did they own land? Was it about status more than complexion? Yes, it was many times in these census. In the 1570s, Walter Raleigh was sent to Munster province in Ireland, where Queen Elizabeth was striving to put down revolts by the Catholic Irish. Queen Elizabeth, again, who was she in alliance with? The Sultan of Morocco, right? The Anglo-Moroccan alliance. And she was having problems with the Catholics. So you see, again, she's Protestant. They have a similar culture or background. The Sultan of Morocco and Queen Elizabeth. Where here Walter and his cousins, the Gilberts, Grenvilles, St. Legers, and Sushis took part in military operations near Cork. Elizabeth was impressed with not only Raleigh's political acumen, but also his dark good looks. His dark good looks. That's what Elizabeth liked. All right? His dark look. Oh man, that's so funny. His dark good looks. Oh man. Yet they want to show us a whitewash painting, right? And every time they show us these whitewash paintings, these people are not just white, they're just like really pale. They look like they're really like a walking corpse. Caspers. But what attracted Elizabeth to Raleigh, not that he was helping her and because he wanted to help her with his Protestant cause, it was mainly because of his dark good looks, straight up. That simple. His dark good looks, it says. She awarded him the royal license as exporter of woolen broadcloth, a lucrative sinecure. He was also appointed warden of the stannaries, director of the Cornish tin mines, and later in life he was alternately in and out of royal favor, unpopular for his religious skepticism, at the same time that he was celebrated as an advocate of religious tolerance. These ambiguities are consistent with crypto-Jewish background. It don't make sense why he would be doing all this stuff, is what I was trying to explain to you. It don't make sense when they're teaching us history. But when we understand that he's a crypto Jew, that's his background, then it all makes sense. Spanish Jews were naturally tolerant of others' religious practices. The famous tenet of convivencia being meaning like living together in harmony, convivencia, having been one of the pillars of civil society that prevailed for so long under the Arabs. In many cases, Spanish Jews were also adherents of Averroism. This was an Arab school of philosophy that extended far beyond its founders, Averroes. Arguments about the oneness of reality. Jewish Averroes were attracted by the potential they saw in the school of thought for resolving the conflicts between philosophy and religion. They tended to believe that both philosophy and religion were equally valid metaphysical constructs, even when they appeared to produce different answers to the same question. It goes without saying that this way of thinking was fraught with the perils of rationalization and solipsism, yet a certain vein of intellectual laziness and cynicism suited perfectly the style of living of many crypto-Jews, according to their chief chronicler David Gitlitz in The Religion of the Crypto-Jews. By 1548, Raleigh was exploring the North American coastlines with his half-brother, Sir Humphrey Gilbert. Their goal, the establishment of British colonies in parlous territories. Colonizing the New World with England and subjects was a core aspect of Elizabeth's political strategy to challenge Spanish hegemony. You see, why they were sending so many people as undesirables, kidnapping these kids, remember, spiriting away, forcing the colonization to beat Spain or the Catholics, to beat the Catholics from colonizing. The cast of characters involved in these often surreptitious efforts included not only Raleigh, Gilbert, Drake, and their several cousins, all their family, their several cousins, they're all related, there's several cousins, Sephardic, Moorish, Crypto, Morisco, Jews, but also other persons we believe to be of Sephardic, Jewish, or Morisco extraction. Among these are the two Richard Hagliots, a probable Moroccan name, Hagliok, Moroccan name. The Hagliok Society collection of books, they got one of the biggest collection of the voyages, these ancient colonial voyages, well, not ancient, but the colonial medieval voyaging books, any writings, they bought them. They have a big collection, the Hagliots. Now we know why. That was their family. Uncle and nephew hired as the West Country Gentleman's London publicist, cartographer, and mathematician John D. Turkish Day, court member Day or D. Day. Astronomers Thomas Harriot and Stephen Parmenius, Italian surname. Ship captains Arthur Fossey, Moroccan name. Simon Ferdinando, Sephardic surname. Thomas Cavendish, Devonshire surname, and probably from the Mediterranean before that. Philip Amadas, Sephardic surname. Pedro Diaz, Sephardic. All right, now I want you to pay attention. There's numbers, there's a lot of sources and footnotes. So they're not just saying, perhaps they want you to go look at the footnote to verify why they're saying that. Right? So again, Pedro Diaz, Sephardic. Arthur Barlow, son of Low or Levi, Low or Levi. And metallurgist Joachim Gans or Joachim Gans, who, as previously mentioned, was an Ashkenazi Jew. All right, we got one Ashkenazi Jew. Hardly one of the West Country gentlemen's associates was not a surname that can be documented in the records of the Spanish Inquisition, as compiled by Pere Bonin in Sangre Judía, or Jewish Blood. Almost all can be found in Wilhelmi Feigenbaum's and collaborators' Dictionary of Sephardic Surnames. All right, look at all these books up if you guys are interested in pursuing the subject. Second edition, 2004. The names in this essential handbook are cross-referenced to local Sephardic Jewish genealogies for Amsterdam, London, Tunisia, Brazil, and other diaspora communities. Diaspora, yes, diaspora. Again, a real middle passage. We're not talking about Kunta Kinte fairy tales here. We're not talking about personal feelings here. We're talking about true history. the real diaspora. Raleigh's accomplishments won him a knighthood and governorship of Virginia. All right, his knighthood and Virginia, that was his cousin. And well, he was attracted to his cousin, right, because of his dark good looks. So might as well make him a knight and give him governorship of Virginia, keep it in the family. Plus, he's like, I like him. The company's first efforts at colonization in Roanoke, 1586 and 1591, ended in failure. But as we argue in chapter 3, all right, so this is the famous lost colony of Roanoke. Remember, who were these people? Yo, they're telling you big things here. Major drop. These are Sephardic Moorish people. We thought these were all English and white Christians. Again, they lied to us. Break the spells. Break the spells. Okay? Wow. Roanoke, lost colony. But as we argue in chapter 3, there is evidence from the passenger list, foodstuff, and occupations of the colonists that they might have been Sephardic refugees. Names such as Ananias, Dare, Jewish first name and likely Jewish last name through a Norman family, and Dionys, Harvey, Greek first name, Breton, and Norman surname formed apparently from Hebrew har, mount, are clearly not English, nor are accountants and university professors among those normally enlisted to sail off and subdue the wilderness. All right. Arguably, these particular draftees consented to participate in the Roanoke settlement of 1587 because they feared the upcoming Spanish invasion of England in 1588 and trusted the Jewish and Morisco organizers. Again, who do they trust? Listen to this. You gotta understand, we got this already in a lot of past videos. Who was really funding the ships and the colonization? Who funded Columbus? Who was funding all this stuff? Who was really organizing all this stuff? Who was the Port Jews? Who are these people? Again, people of color, so-called black people. This is a big one right here, right? They trusted the Jewish and Morisco organizers of the settlement to protect them, all right? One of the financial underwriters of the project was Raleigh's father-in-law, William Sanderson, a wealthy London merchant. Those are the clues, merchant. Although Raleigh's Roanoke colony was never rescued, he did not abandon his efforts to colonize America. Now, before we move on, future video, we're gonna investigate what happened to the Roanoke colony. We got a lead here. These were people of color. Gosh, the hijack. Did they really just all die? Did the Indians all kill them? All these so-called white people? Now that we know they may be actually people of color, so-called Negro people, maybe they blended in with the Indians and married and lived and survived and had and just amalgamated. That's also another possibility. And then 1600s, right, 100 years later, we got other Europeans coming like, hey, these Indians are practicing Jewish customs. Was it always the Indian? Was it a combination of the Sephardic Jew with the Indian rites ceremonies? Was it a combination of both? Was it just the Sephardic Jew or just the Indian tradition? All right, you got to understand, we got to ask all this. We got to ask all these questions. We got to try to understand history. You got to remember that De Soto came with 600 soldiers. Again, these were Moorish auxiliaries. Sephardic Jews, Moorish auxiliaries that they were forced into come battle with him. And also, De Leon went to South Carolina with Caribs and Sephardic Moorish people as well, supposed to be the slaves, the workers, and they left 150 behind. This is in 1520s. What happened to those 150 Moorish people? They just disappeared? What is a Seminole? What are the civilized tribes? In whose eyes are they civilized? Just some deep questions I want really think about. Were they really doing treaties with the white man, or were they doing treaties with their kin? Again, we had a merchant. He got rid of an Indian trader, right? They would have had a child. Let's say this merchant or this Indian was a chief or a queen. They have a child. Their son is eligible to be chief, right? And he's half European. So half European, he grows up, he becomes the chief, and all of a sudden, a distant cousin or somebody of his cultural background, Moorish, Sephardic Jew, comes around, and he does a treaty with that person. And it goes down in history as an English and an Indian doing a treaty. So why did we do treaties sometimes? I'm not saying that was the case, but a lot of the time that was the case. We can't generalize again. People are not one thing. People are not one thing. Especially when we come to people coming together and creating a group named Seminoles, which is Cimarron, which means runaway, supposedly, right? But it's an Arawak word, which means fast like an arrow. Fast like an arrow. The Seminole. All right. And it wasn't just indigenous people as Cimarrones or Maroons. Again, include a lot of these Sephardic Moorish people I'm telling you about, include a lot of Black Irish, Black Scottish people. Trust me, future videos, we're going to break all this down. We're going to go back into the book. I know I'm going to rant. I just want to be able to explain things very thoroughly, because we got to really understand these things. And it's not me. I didn't write this book. I've been doing the research. I got to this point from the research. I found a book that explains everything I kind of like concluded based on my research. How about that? So William Sanderson, Raleigh's, was a London merchant. Although Raleigh's Roanoke colony was never rescued, he did not abandon his efforts to colonize America. In 1595, he launched a new effort, this time directly challenging Spanish power in Central America by planting a British colony in Guyana on the Spanish Main. Who? Raleigh, right? William Sanderson provided the funding, and Oxford mathematics and navigation professor Lawrence Camus from Hebrew Chemai or chemist, and Sir Robert Cross were also involved in it. All right, Guyana, huh? This is another article right here. We read this in one of my book series, Nations of the World. The Jewish settlement in Pomeroon, Kurama, Guyana. The Jewish, oh, yeah, it wasn't English. It actually wasn't English. Actually, crypto Jews, crypto Muslims. They had to go there because they got kicked out of Brazil because the Catholics were back in town. And you know what happened? They eventually had to leave Guyana too because of the same reason. And then they ended up in Curaçao, Jamaica, Bahamas, Barbados. Eventually Florida, South Carolina, Louisiana. All right. But we move on to, again, Sir Francis Drake. Before we look at the whitewashed picture. Before we look at the whitewashed picture, I'm gonna help you break the spell. Troy Johnson is gonna help us break the spell. Troy got the force is strong in him. The force is strong in you, Troy. You got your third eye open. Francis Drake, ladies and gentlemen, dodged the hijack. Yeah, so we're gonna go back to the book. So I'm not sure, what's being said in the chat. I appreciate any moderators here taking care of stuff, and anybody just trying to make sure it's going smoothly. We just going over sources here and real history. All right. We're at Francis Drake now. So Drake was born in Devon around 1540 and was a kinsman of the Hawkins family. All right. He was what? Related to who? The Hawkins family, which included John Hawkins. Remember the first so-called English slaver? But turns out Hawkins wasn't really English. One of the great English sailors of the period, biographer Peter Whitfield comments that in Drake's resentment of Spain became a passion. Why did he resent Spain so much, Drake? Why did he hate Spain so much? Again, remember, these are Catholics he hates. They're persecuting and killing his people, making them convert, making them leave their ancestral lands or wherever they've been for a long time, hundreds of years, and they're making them take this religion that is not theirs. So why would Drake have such resentment against Spain? He learned sailing, as did most of his compatriots, from Sephardic and Morisco navigators like Martin Cortez and Pedro de Medina. So who was teaching everybody how to navigate? Who was in the ships? Who was building them? Who were the captains? Who were the navigators, the map makers, cartographers? Yes, Sephardic and Moriscos, Muslims, Moorish, Jews, Muslims from Spain. Yeah, so anybody spewing that hijack, feel free to just hide them, and we'll think about adding them back. We'll think about adding them back if they behave. I know sinful's hard for some. Mhm. In 1595, John Davis translated Medina's navigational writings into the Seaman's Secrets. The Cornish ports of Bristol and Plymouth, but both known to have crypto-Jewish communities. Bristol, remember, Bristol, I think I got a sign here for you guys. Just show you real quick. The black population of Bristol in the 18th century. The black population. Turns out Bristol and Liverpool were had a very large Swarthy population, so-called black population. Bristol, right, which happens to have large crypto-Jewish communities, became breeding grounds for a generation of privateers, so breeding grounds for pirates, eager to go damage Spain's interests in the Americas. All right, why they want to go straight up to Spain? It's more than just Spain against England. We're talking about people getting revenge. We're talking about people being kicked out of their homes, being persecuted, being killed, being forcibly converted, shamed, thrown out, disfranchised. So we're talking about people wanting to get revenge. So they were meeting up, setting up shop in these port towns of Bristol and Plymouth, England, which happened to be a major so-called slave port for the Americas. They sent a lot of people from Bristol again to the plantations in the Caribbean and North America. Right? So it's very important what I want to explain, so you guys can understand. So when we talk about Pirates of the Caribbean, when we see in these movies, right? Let's go back. All right, this is from another video. Jewish Pirates of the Caribbean, how a generation of swashbuckling Jews carved out an empire in the New World in their quest for treasure, religious freedom, and what? Revenge. 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 It all goes complete circle. If you guys understand, you see the bigger picture now. Jewish pirates. Who's these so-called Jews? We always thought they were talking about what we thought if a Jew was, right? But we're not going to talk about that too much. We want to stay live, right? We don't want to get shut down, unfortunately. So they like us when they talk about Sephardic and Moriscos. They like when we do that. They don't really, like, they're like, okay, just don't mention us. Don't mention us too much. So again, these pirates, so-called pirates, privateers, being contracted by English people who were really crypto-Jewish people, contracting their own people, paying them, financing them to go raid Catholics, not Spain, but Catholics, right? These Catholics may have their family on board, enslaved. Think about that. Drake was perhaps foremost among them. He spent his early years engaged in contraband trade, skirmishing with the Spanish in the Canaries and the Azores, both of which harbored large crypto Jewish communities. The Canary Islands and the Azores, all right? Drake captained a ship owned by his kinsman Hawkins named the Judith, heroine from Hebrew legend. Within a few years, he had fervently committed himself to destroying Spanish holdings in the Americas. As his biographer points out, Spain and all things Spanish became his prey. He would dedicate himself to attacking and plundering Spanish possessions. All right? They dedicated themselves to doing this. You understand why now, right? In May 1572, Drake set sail from Plymouth in a ship named the Swan and the Pasha, English royal emblem and Ottoman title. On Ottoman title, arriving in Panama, he formed an alliance with a group of what? French Huguenots. Who? Francis Drake. Again, who's the Huguenots? Huguenot Moors. With Moors. Let's just rewrite this. Who? Drake, a Sephardic Jew, did an alliance with Moors in Panama. Moors who happened to be privateers slash pirates, pirate Moors in Panama. Drake, a pirate from so-called England, who's Sephardic Jewish, person of color, made an alliance with his cousins, the so-called Huguenots, who are Moors, so-called black people in Panama. Get it? These, we can surmise, included many crypto Jews. If a study of the antecedents of Huguenots among refugees of the Spanish Inquisition can be believed, all right? We already knew the Huguenots were cryptos, but then these we can surmise. Yeah, you definitely can surmise. You're right. They were, many of them were crypto Jews of these Huguenots. They succeeded in capturing a Spanish treasure caravan, totaling 300 tons of silver. Drake returned to England, not only a stupendously wealthy man, all right, but also a national hero, catapulted to the highest fame. You got the Catholics for us. Among Drake's other exploits was the first English circumnavigation of the world, sailing in the Golden Hind. Kabbalistic title. So Drake, yeah, he went around the world. He actually landed in Costa Rica. It's called Drake's Bay today. It's on the Pacific side of Costa Rica, and is believed to be one, if not the place, of where he possibly buried his lost treasure. Drake. Yes, they still haven't found it. Following Sephardic Morisco maps drawn by Mercator, Abraham Ortelius, all right, these map makers, Mercator, Abraham Ortelius, Otello, the Italian, all right, these were all what? Sephardic Moriscos Moors. And Fernão Vaz Durado, perhaps his most revealing initiative with regard to our thesis, was leading the Great West Indian Raid in 1585, which took a fleet of over 20 ships and 1,000 soldiers on a destructive blitz through a Spanish Caribbean, including the ports of Santo Domingo and Hispaniola and St. Augustine in Florida. All right? So the Sephardic Morisco pirates came to crash the party from the Catholics. Again, we're not talking about white versus black. More and more war. The tour ended with a stop to bring relief to his kinsman Raleigh's floundering Roanoke colony of the Virginia coast. In each foray into Spanish territory, Drake made a special effort to sack and ruin Catholic churches. Why did he make a special effort to ruin their Catholic churches? Do you understand? Why did he specifically, personally, want to sack and ruin Catholic churches? Because he's a Sephardic Moor. He's like, yo, you kicked us out, man. We hate you, man. You trying to make us convert? Oh, we're gonna ruin all your churches. We're not just gonna take over your colony. We're gonna destroy your churches too, your Catholic churches, just because. Because I have a grudge, a personal vendetta against you guys. His final stroke against the Spanish came in 1588 when, on the aptly named Revenge, he led the British victory in the fight against the Armada. We propose that not only was Drake aware that he had Sephardic Jewish antecedents, but the Spanish. Sorry. But the Spanish were as well. His surname Drake is Spanish for dragon. Drake is Spanish for dragon, dragon. DNA samples from Drake's brother descendants, Francis, had no children, show their Y chromosome to be type R1A1, a common Ashkenazi Levite lineage. Is it really Ashkenazi? When it's talking about Leviticus, Levite people. We know the Ashkenazi were convert Syrians. Part 1 of my Nations of the World video. All right. You guys enjoying this? Should we continue? I think we're going to continue. We're going to get to John Hawkins, the famous John Hawkins. Famous John Hawkins. Supposed to be the first slaver, right? Are we talking about a person of color here? I think so. So dodge the hijack with whitewashing. John Hawkins, 1532 to 1595, was a kinsman of Drake, and his life serves as a critical piece of evidence for our Sephardic Morisco thesis. I break the spell. Hawkins was never an English white Christian. Break the spell. We're talking about slave masters, slavers, and all these people invading, right? These foreigners coming with their... No, you got the whole picture wrong. And I know it's not your fault. That's what they told us growing up. We assumed, we believed these were all white people. We believed that anybody who was a slaver or owned slave was so-called white. We believed. We got to get past believing. We got to start knowing. We know now. Because his life serves as a critical piece of evidence for our Sephardic, Moorish, Morisco, Moor thesis. His father William was the leading merchant in Plymouth. The leading merchant in Plymouth. Plymouth was one of those ports, right, where they were enslaving people and bringing them to America. He was the merchant there, making sure they were being sent, making all the money of people. Sephardic Moriscos during the 1530s and traded in the Caribbean and with Portuguese held Guyana. The ports of Plymouth and Bristol, from which he sailed, were notable locations for what have been termed port Jews. Port Jews, again, Plymouth and Bristol. I had a feeling this was a port Jew. You know what's funny though? If you go read into Bristol slavery, you're gonna see that Bristol was a big slave port. So it's really a port, a Jewish port, so-called Sephardic Morisco port. Merchant, they were dealing people, trade, commerce, commodities, everything. From Plymouth and Bristol, men sailed in the company of Magellan and Sebastian Caboto. Among these ambiguous figures was Captain Roger Barlow, who later accompanied Drake to North America. The Hawkins family history in Cornwall can be traced to the late 1400s, when John Hawkins, and it has a footnote 50, of Howistock House, married John Amidas, compare Amadas, Spanish, above, of Lucenton. All these names appear to be Sephardic Jewish. John and Joanne Hawkins had a son, William, who by 1524 was treasurer for the Corporation of Plymouth and tax collector for Devon County. Who was handling the money? The money, the measurement of gold, money. Who's handling the money? The money. Sephardic Morisco people. It's always been. That's, who established Wachovia Bank? Let them know, Mac. Moravians. William married John Trelawney, Cornish surname. Father and son, William in 1519 and John in 1532. A later Richard Hawkins from this same line, born 1560, would marry Judith Hill of Bristol family, which immigrated to Virginia in 1620, and which is related to one of the authors, Hirschman. The Healy family name underwent permutation to Hale. In the colonies, they are listed as free persons. Oh, big one right there, right? Listed as free persons. All right. But why would white people be listed as free persons? Wouldn't they be white? I mean, free anyways. Like, why do you have to list them as free persons? They're letting you know a big drop here. What are they being listed as? Let me show you. We're not talking about white people. They were listed as what? Free persons of color in Tennessee during the late 1700s and are considered Melungeon. Oh, the Melungeons. Oh, the Melungeons. Okay. So just, be nice to everybody in the chat and make sure, as long as nobody's being rude or anything, we give them a chance. But thank you anyways. And again, that was a big drop. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. To me, that's major. All right. Because there's actual evidence of these people being listed as people of color in the 1700s. And they were actually considered what? Melungeon? We know Melungeon tri-racial people a lot of the time, including Indian, Europeans, so-called runaways, right? But who are these runaways really? Are they really Africans? So what's really the makeup of Melungeon? Members of a lower Appalachian ethnic isolate believed to derive from Portuguese Jews and fellow travelers like Moriscos and Scotsmen, the Black Scots. So Portuguese Jews, we know they were very swarthy. We got the accounts of that. Hawkins' biographer James Alexander Williamson states the custom ledgers of Henry VIII show William Hawkins exporting cloth and tin to the ports of Western Europe and importing a variety of goods. The salt of Rochelle, wines of Bordeaux, Portugal, and Spain, sugar and pepper probably from Portugal, olive oil, and soap from Spain. It is very probable that some of the sugar and wines were bought from the Canaries. And all these ports, Jews, crypto-Jews, Moors, and crypto-Muslims were often in control of maritime trade, right? We're talking about real history here. Again, break the spell. Don't forget this info. Don't let it just go one ear and leave the other. Like, hold on to this. See how it relates to you. Hawkins also traded with Portuguese Brazil under the invading Dutch, the first land in the West that opened up for freestanding Sephardic settlements. Again, Brazil. He dealt with other merchants such as Robert Rennegar, Thomas Bory, and John Phillips. The pattern of trading and origin of these surnames are indicative of Sephardic Jewish ethnicity. By 1548, the Hawkins family and its associates were trading in Morocco, a haven for both Sephardim and Moriscos. A haven. Morocco, a haven for who? Sephardic Jews and Moriscos? A haven. The French ports with which the family traded, Dieppe, Rouen, and La Rochelle, were also heavily populated by Protestant Huguenots, again, popping out of everywhere. Again, it's all the same people. It's all family. They were trading with Protestant Huguenots again. Many of those whose origins were Sephardic and Morisco. Who? The Huguenots were what? Moors and Sephardic Jewish, Moorish Jews. The French Protestants by 1560 had undertaken attacks on Spanish interests in Cartagena. Again, they're just in Colombia and all these places, Havana, that's Cuba, Santiago, Chile, Santa Marta, I'm not sure where, but they're not just attacking Spain, the country, because a lot of them are Spanish. Remember, they're Sephardic Jewish and Moriscos. They're coming from Spain themselves. They're attacking Catholics. Who? Moors and Sephardic Jews. One may speculate that when Rouen, a center of English Jewry, exempt from many of the regulations concerning Jews since the time of William the Conqueror, or before passed to the French quarter, French under Queen Mary in 1553. Many Rouennese Jews threw in their lot with the Huguenots. All right, many what? They threw in their what? With the Huguenots to escape the growing anti-Jewish climate. So again, you see all these people have a similar story, being persecuted the same way, all the same people. Dr. Haja with the tags. Rouen and La Harre became popular stopping-off points for Spanish Jews in exile. At any rate, it was the Sephardic and Morisco population of Spain fleeing after 1492 to France, the Dutch Republic, and England. All right, all these places. Dutch, remember, especially New Jerusalem, who's the Dutch? Who's the Black Dutch? Who's the real Dutch traders that was most committed psychologically and militarily to her destruction of a world power? And Protestant regimes in France, Holland, and Britain. Protestants, again, Protestants. Full circle, you see this? Who? In France, Holland, and Britain. This is why they were fighting with Spain, so supposedly Spain, right? Catholics, or the Roman Catholic Empire. Undoubtedly were aware that several of their most fervently anti-Spanish and pro-Protestant sailors and soldiers were Sephardic Jews and Moriscos, who many what? Pro-Protestants were what? Moors, Protestants, Moors, Sephardic Jews, Protestants, Moors. Right? Repetition is good. Beneath Christian camouflage. Moors beneath Christian camouflage. Using Protestant outwardly, remember? But they also were politic enough to let this go in order to obtain their talents and passion as anti-Catholic warriors. During the 1560s, John Hawkins established himself as a trader, merchant in the Canary Islands. Merchant Hawkins, here one of his foremost friends and partners was the Genoese descended merchant, Pedro de Ponte, another merchant. The Ponto family was and is a prominent one in the Canaries. It is self-avowedly of Sephardic extraction, right? It goes full circle again. In 1559, Hawkins married Catherine Gonson, the daughter of Benjamin Gonson, Scottish Norwegian surname. Treasurer of the Navy, the marriage led to his connection to a set of powerful men dominating Britain's naval operations: William Winter, Lionel Ducat, and Sir Thomas Lodge. Hawkins' partner included Juan Martinez of Cadiz, Spain, and Lorenzo Barnaldi of Santo Domingo, a lawyer and a converted Jew. One of the captains sailing often on Hawkins' trading and raiding expeditions, another kinsman, John Lovell, also carries a Sephardic surname. Lovell. Others include Guillermo de Oclando, Valentin Bird Green, and Robert Barrett, who reportedly spoke Spanish. Right? So Valentin Bird, right? Verde, bird is green. Barrett was captured, bird in Spanish, right? Is green or verde. Barrett was captured by the Spanish and burned alive by the Inquisition in Seville in 1570. You see why Drake and these people hate the Spanish. They have so much resentment against the Spanish or the Catholics because they were doing that. They were burning Sephardic Moors at the stake alive. They were doing that. That was the Inquisition. You understand why they were raiding? That's why they became pirates. What led to the whole pirate thing of the Caribbean, the movie. All right? They were burning them alive. Others of Hawkins' men seized by the Spanish and tortured by the Inquisitional proceedings were William Collins, Paul de Leon from Leon, William Griffin, George Rively, John Moon or Luna, right? Luna in Spanish. John Lee, William Brown, Thomas Goodall, John Gilbert, Roger R. Marr, John Gray, John Martin, George D. or Day, Diaz, and Miles Greek Milo. Phillips, natives to the Netherlands, France, Ireland, and England. Many of these were not English or Irish or French, but to judge from their surnames, they were what? Sephardic or Moorish ancestry, okay? In 1569, the Huguenots or Huguenots and English merchants. So again, comrades, right? Confederation coming together. Merchants and Huguenots, all the same people, in the port of Plymouth were working in concert to assail Spanish shipping or Catholic shipping and the imperial treasure fleet. The French Cardinal Chatillon, a Huguenot, likely Sephardic, a Huguenot who's likely Sephardic despite his Catholic office, the name perhaps originally Castillon, from Chatillon. Actually, it went from Castillon to Chatillon. Was in London on a campaign urging an attack on all the enemies of God, otherwise called Papists. Drake's kinmen, the Capernauns, were deeply involved in this effort and was a Cornish man named Philip Wadukushai. All right, let's see where we are here. And we've got that much left, so we're gonna read and try to finish chapter 2. All right, at least today. Hope you guys are enjoying this. Hit share and like if you are enjoying this. Make sure everybody gets the info. We're gonna go into Martin Frobisher. Who is Martin Frobisher? Frobisher was a privateer slash pirate, right, with roots not in Cornwall or Devon but Yorkshire. According to the biographer James McDermott, the family had crossed the border from Scotland and bore originally the name Frobisher, a variant of Forbes. Related like Phillips to the Jewish names Phoebus, Farabi, and Farabi. Martin Frobisher's mother, Margaret York, was closely related to Sir John York of London, the notable merchant tailor, financier, and Iberian trader. John York traded in Antwerp and Calais, acted as a master of the London Tower Mint in 1544, raised foreign funds for Henry VIII, and helped found the Suffolk Mint, all typical occupations for conversos, meaning that was the jobs or professions of Moorish Sephardic Jews. Now from this, by 1547, he was Sheriff of London. He acted, so listen, a converso, person of color, right? 1547, England, all right? A sheriff, we're gonna say, straight up say it, all right? We're gonna use the tags right now. A black person was Sheriff of London in 1547. This is what I want you to understand when we're reading things like this. When we say converso, that's a tag. He acted as one of the king's principal financial agents in the Netherlands. And most lucratively, he received unprecedented terms to supply the Tower Mint with silver bullion from Flanders. From this description and his activities and titles, John York would also appear to be of Sephardic descent. It was into his uncle John York's home and business that young Martin Frobisher was sent to learn a trade by his mother. Frobisher was posted abroad on trading trips to the Barbary Coast and the Portuguese African slave colony of Guinea by a syndicate of London merchants that included, beside his uncle, Thomas Locke, Edward Castilian, Sir George Barney, Anthony Hickman, and Nicholas Lambert. The Lockes are described as fervent Protestants. One of them, John Locke, having made a personal pilgrimage to Jerusalem in 1553. The name appears to come either from Hebrew loak, number, table, tariff, or calendar, or the Spanish place named Logo. Famous bearers of the Louk or Lok surname lived in Morocco, Tangiers, and Spain. as well as modern-day Israel. The Locks, George Barney, William Towey's son, John Cartelet, and Stephen Borrow, Baruch. Borrow is Baruch, Hebrew for blessed, were principals in the Muscovy Company, an English-Russian trading venture established in the 1550s. The company's directors were the Earl of Lancaster, William Cecil, first Baron of Burghley, and Sir Francis Walsingham. Look at that, Walsingham, principal advisor to Elizabeth, a man who was in the eyes of his contemporaries the most ardent anti-Catholic in England. Another Locke family member, Michael, was a brilliant cartographer and astronomer who spoke Spanish, French, Italian, Latin, and Arabic, and who had traveled to France, Spain, Portugal, Venice, Greece, and the Levant. Michael ended his career in Aleppo, Turkey, serving there as a consul of the English Levant Company. Frobisher accompanied both Drake and Raleigh on their Spanish raids, all right, and assisted with the initial push to establish the Roanoke colony. All right, so what happened to these Roanoke? We don't have such a very popular, we don't know if they were mistreating the Indians or what really happened. Again, we're going to dig into this. But it seems like these Sephardic Moorish people were the ones trying to get this established. And what happened? Dying without issue, he left his estate to nieces and nephews. His will was witnessed by Thomas Coldwell, Anthony Lewis, civic name for sacred name for Levi, Timothy Perrott, Richard Ferrer, Spanish for blacksmith or a common Jewish trade. His wife Dorothy shortly thereafter married Sir John Saville, Jewish form of Samuel, Baron of the Exchequer, often an office held by Jews. All right, so major drop there on this person and his family. Also had some relations there with the what I would assume is the Dutch West Indian or East Indian Company or the Royal African Society. And this is all, shout out to Against for Topcast. So this makes sense, when we're talking about people creating this Royal African Society and finding out these were people of color. Well, we know kind of like who they may have been now. So we're going to Robin Sidney Sidoney, Earl of Leicester. The list of family names of likely Sephardic or crypto-Jewish ancestry in Elizabethan England would not be complete without two much more prominent players in the trade and diplomacy of the day. The first is the Sidneys, also spelled Sidoney, in Sidon, Palestine. One of the leading figures in this line was Robin Sidney, Earl of Leicester, 1563 to 1626. Robin is a form of Reuben, right? The tribe of Reuben. So Jewish, right? Hebrew. Robin is Reuben. Robinson, the son of Robin. Robin is Reuben. All right? A name favored by crypto Jews. Robert Sidney's father, Henry, was a radical Protestant, right? Quotation marks. According to biographer Hay, in 1579, Robert was placed under the tutelage of Hubert Languet, a scholarly Huguenot emigrant. On a tour through the Low Countries, France and Germany, Languet introduced him to the eminent champions of Protestantism in the late 1500s, including the Prince of Orange, right? The Prince of Orange. Francois de Lannoy, Robert's older brother, Philip, also ardently Protestant, was tutored by Mr. Saville, medieval Hebrew Saville. He numbered among his friends and associates such men as John Norreus, Noor, Arabic for light, Walter Raleigh, and Joachim Camerasi. In the 1570s, Philip Sidney attempted to form a unified European Protestant coalition against the Catholic Church in Spain. All right, so you see, that's what really was going on. A European Protestant coalition, a confederation, People coming together against who? Catholic Church in Spain. Kind of like the same. In the early 1580s, he argued for an assault on Spain itself. He is best remembered for his defense of Poesy, a seminal treatise on literature from the Renaissance period. One of his best friends was the cult humanist Giordano Bruni. Oh man, Giordano Bruni, the alchemist, hermetic. We got him in my thought videos, who helped introduce the Kabbalah and Egyptian magic in his native Italy. So the Kabbalah is Egyptian magic, huh? Sidney's last work, left incomplete at his death, was a verse translation of the Psalms. Robert married Barbara, the daughter of wealthy John Gamache. In 1584, by 1589, oh, I'm sorry, he married her in 1584. By 1589, he had been named governor of Flushing in the British-held province of Zeeland in the Netherlands, where he instituted free trade channels with England and required his soldiers to follow strict Calvinist religious practices. Again, remember, Protestantism, Calvinism, Huguenot, it's all Sephardic, crypto-Jewish, Moorish people. He became allied personally and politically with the House of Orange, especially with Louis de Coligny's son, Count Maurice, medieval Hebrew form of Moses. The Sidney family was also intimately involved in the New World colonization from the 1580s. The Virginia Company, one of their many investments, again, the Virginia Company, who invested? Sephardic Moorish people in the Virginia Company, right? One of their many investments is described as embodying the radical Protestant element, interest in the New World. Radical Protestant element, all right, quotations. All of the company of Sir Thomas Gates, the first governor of Virginia, had served under Prince Maurice of Nassau, all right? Major drop there too. We get into Robert Devereux. Devereux. That's the hijack with the whitewashing. Remember, the Devereux family came to England with the Norman conquest. They take their name from Evreux, a town in Lower Normandy near Rouen. By the 1570s, they were allied with the dyed-in-the-wool Protestants and Elizabethan England, marrying into the Knowley, Herod, and Sidney Sidoney families. Note the use of Robin for Robert. In 1573, Walter Devereux, now Earl of Essex, was dispatched to Ireland to colonize Ulster for England. His wife Lettice, or Leticia, a Roman Jewish name, was described as dark and beautiful. Again, Lettice, Roman Jewish, Edomite Jewish. Is that what you're saying? Roman, who's a Roman? The Edomite, Hebrew Jewish. That's why it's Jewish. Edomite, Roman, was described as dark. The Edomites were dark complexion. Romans are dark, right? Letting us know, dark, Roman, and beautiful, and was the granddaughter of Mary Boleyn. Their son Robert, exceedingly handsome and a future favorite of Elizabeth I, began attending college in 1579 at Cambridge at age 10, taking both his bachelor's and master's degrees, and becoming fluent in Greek and in Hebrew. While at Cambridge, he became friends with William Meyrick, probably from Hebrew name Meir. Among the family retainers was Anthony Bagot, another probable Sephardic name. When his close friend Sir Philip Sidney was killed fighting the Spanish in the Netherlands, remember, so these people are Protestants, they're coming together, they're Sephardic Jews, crypto Muslims, they're fighting the Spanish, again, the Catholics. He got killed in Holland, the Netherlands. Robert married his widow. As historian Robert Lacey naively describes it, Robert Devereux paid court to Sidney's widow, Frances. It was a chivalrous, charmingly medieval conceit linked to the Old Testament tradition of brothers caring for each other's widows. That's why he took on the wife of his brother. And what were Sidney and Exodus, if not brothers in arms? There seems no other good reason for such a match. The lady was not wealthy, and her father, Sir Francis Walsingham, was very near his end. In our view, such a marriage was sanctioned not because it was a quaint custom or conceit, but because of the Jewish ancestry of three parties involved. It satisfied Levirate law, which required a Jewish male, if free, to marry his brother's widow, based on the Torah, Deuteronomy 25, 5:10. Countless examples of this type of marriage can be adduced from the family histories of colonial American Jews, as well as we shall see in due course. Dr. John D. now. All right, we're almost done here today. I appreciate you guys tuning in. We're just trying to get through chapter 2. A lot of good info. A lot of info in this book. We try to get through it, as much as we can. Appreciate you guys in the chat. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for, if you tuned in to this later and you're just hearing it right now, thank you for tuning in and taking the time to watch this. I appreciate everybody again in the chat and anybody who has donated. Much love and respect to you. Thank you, Harlem, for that. XRP Harlem. All right, we continue here. It says Dr. John D. Without the talents of the Elizabethan academician John D., a brilliant polymath who claimed to be a magician, England's entry into the New World would assuredly have been second-rate. He was born in London in 1527. His father Roland was a textile merchant, and his mother Jane Wilde. He grew up near Lombard Street, the banking district named for the Italian and Jewish merchants who settled there in the 1100s. Right, so we're talking about not just during Inquisition and Sephardic and Moorish Jews, going to England or these places. There was actually Jews there, so-called Jews there since the 1100s, 1200. Remember, they made a law in 1290. They had to pick them out. And again, these people are also people of color. We ain't talking about Ashkenazi Jews here in the 1100s. In 1547, John D. became a professor of Greek at Cambridge, where one of his students was Sir Philip Sidney. Notably, D signed his name only with a Greek delta. The university was in the process of overhauling its curriculum to include, among other subjects, readings in Greek and Arabic mathematics. Much of D's research in astronomy, mathematics, and engineering was preserved through the efforts of Elias Ashmole, Hebrew or Arabic name, an antiquarian and Freemason, whom we will discuss at length when we return to Freemasonry in chapter 10. All right, so look forward to that chapter, right? This work was grounded in Hermetic ideas, Hermeticism, who created this Egyptology, Pan-African Egyptology, Hermetics based on Hermetics, Freemasonry Hermetics, ideas then in the ascendancy in the Low Countries, which had recently received a rich intellectual infusion from Iberian conversos and Moriscos, Moors, following the expulsion of 1492, 1497, and 1540, and 1580. In June 1548, D moved to the University of Louvain, near Brussels, where he joined fellow Protestant humanist Roger Ascham, named after the Yorkshire village Ashcombe. Gemma Precious, Gemma, usually now a feminine name, is Arabic for the name of a star. And Gerard Mercator, example, merchant, Mercator means merchant, the translation for the Hebrew name Jacob, who were constructing, surveying, and navigational charts of the known world. Ashcombe wrote the schoolmaster regulating English grammar for the first time. Also in this brilliant milieu were Abraham Ortelius, an Italian cartographer believed to be a converso, Pedro Nunes, a Portuguese converso navigator, people who converted to Christianity from Muslim and Sephardic Jewry. John Sheck, William Cecil, and Duke of Northumberland. It was brilliant coterie of international savants, and if ever there was one. D was deeply involved in the Duke of Northumberland's attempts to place a Lady Jane Grey on England's throne, narrowly escaping the reprisals of Queen Mary. Suffering similar laws of their jobs or banishment were D's friends John Day, or Ned Diaz, a prominent printer, John Field, a publisher and astronomer, and Sir Thomas Burger, royal accountant and auditor. All were whispered to be part of a secret Protestant cell, secret cryptos, secret, cryptos, Protestant cell. Sound like Huguenots to me. Huguenots, Confederation, they took an oath. Cluttered around Princess Elizabethan. She had a secret Protestant cell, right? Queen Elizabeth. And none of these was a John Philpot, Archdeacon of Winchester Cathedral, Norman surname from Greek Philippos. Philpot spoke and read Hebrew, had studied at Oxford University and traveled to Venice and Padua, both of which cities had robust Converso and Morisco populations. Venice, Moorish, Padua, Moorish populations, Moors, a robust Moorish population. He refused to conduct mass as long as Mary was England's queen. Ultimately, he was burned at the stake. All right, another Morisco burn. Fox's Book of Martyrs recounts how Queen Mary's prosecutors cruelly imprisoned, tortured, and tried and executed Philpot at Smithfield near London, December 18, 1555. It was a case that might have been taken out of the pages of the Spanish Inquisition. He barely escaped the same fate, but survived until Elizabethan ascended to the throne through the help, among others, of Robert Dudley, John Ashley, and Pedro Nunes, the Portuguese converso, mathematician, and cosmographer. Once Elizabeth was queen, he began to flaunt his Kabbalistic knowledge. As Elizabethan historian Woolley, perhaps disingenuously, writes, he had taught himself Hebrew and acquired Hebrew text. Okay, so you see what he's pointing out? So when they tell the history of this guy, they're saying that the guy learned and taught himself Hebrew and acquired Hebrew text. No, he was Hebrew or Jewish. He was a Morisco Sephardic Moorish Jew. John Cheek had also advocated being fluent in both Hebrew and Greek. He went much deeper and began investigating gematria. Where does gematria come from? Look at that, gematria, the Kabbalistic Sephiroth, cryptology, and mathematics. You see cryptology, gematria, Sephardic Moorish people creating this. By 1563, he was back in Antwerp, involved with secretive groups that invited all lovers of truth, of whatever nation and religious power they be, to become part of an intellectual brotherhood. What are we talking about here? Illuminati, Freemasonry, what's going on? Secret societies, what are we talking about here? He acted as a consultant of Sir Lionel Ducat, Lord Mayor of London, and Walter Raleigh, helping them oversee tin mines on Raleigh's property and Devonshire, and Devonshire. It was his cartographic expertise that enabled the English Muscovy Trading Company, who traveled the 1,500 miles distance to reach Moscow secure. Oh, hold up, guys. I have to review my video. They're telling me it's not suitable for advertisement, so I got to do a manual request so then to manually review it so I can be able to monetize it. 1 second. That's how they play with me every time. All right. Second. Do that. Okay, we're good. All right, so again, sorry about that. It was his cartographic expertise that enabled the English Muscovy Trading Company to travel to 1,500 miles distance to reach Moscow and secure trade relations with Russian Tsar Ivan the Terrible. Russian Tsar Ivan. Who's this Ivan and what does he have to do with Genghis Khan? Who's this Ivan and what does he have to do, Ivan the Terrible, with Genghis Khan and Peter the Terrible, Peter the Great, Ivan? What's he got to do with Georgy Danilovich? 20 years later, he was collaborating with Martin Frobisher, Michael Locke, and Stephen Borrow in a zealous nationalistic campaign to find a northwest passage to China. In 1577, Dee published a remarkable book outlining a plan for building a worldwide British Empire, titled in brief, General and Rare Memorials. Its front piece displayed Elizabethan I at the helm of a ship Above her hung the sun, the moon, the stars, and a glowing spear bearing the tetragrammaton, Hebrew anagram for God's name, Wah, Yahweh. All these emblems were symbols charged with Kabbalistic meaning, in vogue from the current writing of metaphysician Giordano Bruno and Platonist Pico della Mirandola in Italy. Now you see who's starting this whole Pan-African Hermetics, right? Pop pass on to son. These households had become a popular meeting place for European intellectuals of probable Sephardic or Morisco descent who dabbled in magic. Mapmaker Abraham Ortelius, Alexander Simon, known as the Persian Ninevite, lawyer Richard Haglio, Simon Fernandez, the converso navigator for the Roanoke voyages, Sir Humphrey Gilbert, half-brother to Sir Walter Raleigh, and astronomer Thomas Harriot. Traveling to Bohemia in 1584, Dee was guest at the home of Thaddeus Hayek, astronomer and physician to Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II. Hayek's father was the alchemist Simon Bacalar, who, like Thaddeus, bears an Arabic surname. The vice-chancellor to Emperor Rudolph was Jacob Kurz, a botanist and astronomer. In our view, these royal courtiers, like Dee and several of his English and Dutch associates, were descendants of converso and Moors, exiles from Iberia. Moors, exiled from Iberia, all those people. We always thought they were white people. Break the spell. Richard Grenville. Again, we're almost done here. Grenville represents a transitional figure who will take us from England to North American shores. He was a Cornishman whose antecedents can be reliably traced back no further than 1513 in England. The family's name was originally spelled Greenfield in English and what? Campo Verde. That's what it means, Greenfield, Campo Verde. Campo Verde in Spanish, the latter being a Sephardic surname. So it became anglicized and became Greenfield, but it was Campo Verde. That's how they kept their crypto status. They married into the Curtani, Arundel, Aaron with the Theophoric, Vivian, Life, Chaim in Hebrew, St. Aubin, Gilbert, and Bonneville, Goodhouse, families. Richard's father, Roger, was married to a cousin, Thomasine Cole, near the Tavi, Tau, a Greek letter, and Tamar Rivers in Devonshire, Tamar. Richard himself married Mary St. Ledger, whose family was mentioned earlier. Other St. Ledgers in the same generation took spouses by the name of Stukeli, Bellew, and Termini. A generation earlier, we find the Greenvilles, Terminis, the Champerrouns, and Gilberts multiply, intermarried, including Raleigh's forming a tidy-knit, markedly endogamous community in Cornwall. All these Sephardic Moorish families keeping it together, keeping it in the family, married into each other. This continued as the colonizers came over to the United States. By 1545, Walter Raleigh had taken up his late half-brother Humphrey Gilbert's character, colonized North America for the English crown. The effort was strongly supported by Thomas and Richard Haglio, who wrote tracts on his behalf, as well as by Thomas Cavendish, Thomas Harriot, and Ralph Ruffey, modeled on the Hebrew name Raphael Lane, as A.L. Rosie describes the venture. The little fleet which Grenville commanded consisted of 7 sails, the Tiger of 140 tons, a fleet boat called the Roebuck of the same burden, the Lion of 100 tons, the Elizabethan of 50 tons, and Dorothy, a small bark, with 2 pinnacles for speedy service. There were aboard a number of gentlemen, mostly young men, who had volunteered to make trial of the new country. There was Ralph Lane, one of the Queen's equerries, whom Grenville appointed to take charge of the colony on his return. Thomas Cavendish, the brilliant young navigator who repeated Drake's exploit of circumnavigating the globe, was another. He was now 25, and it seems to have been his first introduction to the sea. Equally interesting was the presence of Thomas Harriot, who became the foremost scientist and mathematician in England. He was now about the same age as Cavendish, but unlike him, he remained a whole year in the new country under Lane's government, and later wrote the True Report of Virginia. a document full of close observation and scientific curiosity. Grenville took with him a considerable West Country contingent. There was Philip Amadas, right, Spanish, who remained under Lane as admiral of the country. John Arundel, Grenville's half-brother, his brother-in-law John Stukeley, a Kendall, one of the predokes of Pasdo, a Courtenay, Anthony Rosey, the friend and later executor of Drake's will, along with others. So surely an otter group to assemble for high-risk colonizing expedition across the Atlantic cannot be imagined. So surely an otter or odd, like named odd, an odd group, like these weird people from different backgrounds coming together, risk colonizing expeditions. Well, these people were family. Unless there was an overriding purpose for their efforts. Grenville, like Drake, Sidney, and Raleigh, participated in the Protestant colonization of Munster province in Ireland that proceeded hand in hand with England's drive towards the New World. Prior to joining the Irish campaigns, he put his estates in order in Cornwall and named as trustees Walter Raleigh, Sir Arthur Bassett, Sir Francis Godolphin, Henry Killigrew, Richard Bellow, Jewish surname, his brother-in-law John Haley, or Haley, a Sephardic Melungeon family mentioned earlier, Christopher Harris, in German, Hirsch, the biblical emblem of the tribe of Naphtali, and John Fassi, or Fassi, a Sephardic surname meaning from Fez, Morocco. Fassi, Fez, Morocco. Even his estate, should he die, to his son Bernard. In 1585, his daughter Mary wed her close cousin Arthur Tremonti, her cousin, keeping it in the family, remember, a traditional practice for both Sephardim and Moriscos, a traditional practice amongst Moors. Accompanying Grenville to Ireland for colonization were chiefly members of his own family circle. There was his second son, John, and there was his half-brother, John Arundel, whom had accompanied him on the Virginia voyage in 1585. Then there were Christopher Harris of Radford, who later married Grenville's daughter, Bridget, Thomas Stukeley, who may have been brother of the John who went on the 1585 voyage, and was Grenville's brother-in-law, John Bellew, another brother-in-law, John Fassi, who signed Grenville's family settlement as witness in 1586. And it says here, the last page, Grenville played a significant role in repelling the Spanish Armada 3 years later. He sailed with Captain Fanarin Cross, or Cruz, a common converso surname, as already mentioned, and a cousin James Arisi. Again, all these people kind of related or family or know each other or associated in some way. They're not just random Europeans going after Spain. He purchased supplies for that voyage from Harry, John, Richard, and Thomas jeweler, a Jewish occupation. Finally, in 1587, he was wounded in battle aboard his ship, the Revenge. Captured, he died speaking his final words in Spanish, "Here die I," having fought for country queen, religion, and honor. After his death, his son Bernard married Elizabeth Beeville on the edge of the Moor overlooking Camel Valley. The Moor, on the edge of the marsh. Moor, another definition for more marsh, maybe marshy land, uncultivated land, overlooking the Camel Valley in Cornwall. The Grenville family changed its name once again in the 1600s to Grenville. This became a popular boy's name among crypto-Jewish Appalachian families. We close this chapter in the hopes that the reader, all right, we're going to close today's video hoping that you guys listen to this, that you guys listen to me right now, are willing at least to entertain. I hope you guys are do more than just entertain, but yeah, at least willing to entertain the possibility that conversos and Moriscos, Moors, right, Sephardic Jews and Moors were not only present and active, but also prominent and even dominant in important affairs in England, France, and the Netherlands during the 1500s. We're talking about, 500 years ago? 500 years ago? A lot can happen in 500 years, right? A lot can happen in 500 years. Much love and respect to everybody in the chat. Wow. Humbled. Hey, thank you, brother. So, 1500s, huh? Their ranks included some of the most notable scientists, soldiers, and adventurers of that period. All eyes were now turned on a religious haven on the other side of the world. Even before the present age, America served as a magnet for those who suffered persecution at home. It was in England, with the assistance and vision and talents of Sephardic Jewish and their allies among crypto Jewish British families, that the greatest aspirations were nurtured toward realization of this destiny. All right, big one. All right, that was a really good chapter. Really good chapter. That was chapter 2 of this book. All right, we're gonna get, actually that was chapter 1 only. We've only gone through chapter 1, but chapter 2 is gonna be Sephardim in the New World. I've gone ahead and read a lot of this. I do audio. I let archive.org read it to me, and so I can get prepared just in case. And I heard this chapter, and it's very good, especially when we're talking about the Caribbean and who these were in these Spanish countries: Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Cuba, Florida. And we're going to continue to see more in North America as well. Sephardim in the New World. All right. But again, I hope you're willing to entertain, or at least verify the information. All right. Sephardic Moorish people, very prominent in the 1500s, already in England, France, and Holland. Moriscos, Moors. All right. Hope you guys enjoyed the presentation today. Right. And I just feel like, I just want to go over this whole book because it has so much info. I didn't want to just keep picking little things here and there, because I'd go to look for things to read to you guys, and I would just get stuck reading the whole thing. And I'm like, wow, I got to read this whole book to you guys. All right. Appreciate Day9. Thank you for sharing my link to the Patreon page. If you guys appreciate and want to support this, and for this to continue, make this a forever thing, then that's the way you can do it. Helping me, making this, because I spent a lot of time on this, and it has become like a job. And I never planned to, like I told Max in the interview, I never planned to become a YouTuber or become a genealogist or anything like that. I never would have imagined anything like that. I was always into history. I'm good at video editing. I'm good at finding things. I'm good at investigating. And that's just the outcome. And I want, hopefully, you guys to see that the info's out there. The whole point of this is to know that we're learning. We're continuing to learn. I want you guys to understand that we continue to learn. It's not one thing. I want to address something. I want to address something. I get a lot of hate. I get a lot of trolls from people, mad when it comes to this subject, or for me to colorize certain indigenous people, and people calling them Mongols and all this stuff, and where's their hair, how come their hair is not like this, and all this stuff, and why are you showing us Mongols and all this stuff. First of all, can you show me their Mongol genealogy and ancestry first of all, before you label them that? Because they labeled you African American all your life. They called you an African all your life. Are you African? Are you African? No, right? But we're starting to see you may be a lot of things, not just Indian. Shout out to Troy Johnson for the painting of a true depiction of Francis Drake. Right? Again, this has been a long journey, and again, we're learning. We're gonna learn a lot more things. A lot of things ain't written in stone yet. We're writing the stone right now. All right, so I know a lot of you guys say biggest fans of me and you follow me, but I just don't like when you colorize the picture. So if you're a big fan of mine, then you're not really learning. if you're talking about stereotyping people based on physical appearance and learning that, genealogy could be very complex, your personal genealogy can be very complex. So until you know who you are, 100%, you can't point fingers at anybody. There's a lot of stories and a lot to be told, and each person and each individual. So yeah, you can lose a person's phenotype and maybe color, maybe not phenotype that much, but at least the complexion and somewhat the phenotype in a generation or two. You guys know this. All right. So what about 500 years? All right. So how many grandmas can you have in 500 years? And grandpas? And again, are they all Indians? And if they are, awesome. I don't doubt it. I don't doubt you guys have Indian in you. I don't doubt it. We read today the crypto Jewish merchant marrying the Indian. We know a lot of the 5 civilized tribes, that was the case with a lot of the chiefs that we assumed were only Indian. A lot of these chiefs that we go back to and trace back to, they were half. They were half Sephardic or Moors, half Moorish people, and Indian. All right, 2 major genealogies. 2 major genealogies, not just one. But yeah, we're gonna embrace everything, right? We're gonna embrace and learn. We're gonna learn about ourselves, not just as a group, but individually too. I can't tell you your whole story. I can't tell you your whole story. You gotta tell me. You gotta tell me your story. And I hope when you tell me this story, you're not just based on what you hear and the doctrine that we've heard all our lives. I hope you can tell me your story correctly and maybe have some sources or something I can correlate with. Because the info's really out there. They can tell and you can believe that they burned everything and that it's so hard, genealogy is so hard and they burned everything and there's no, my tribe's records all, I mean, if that's what you believe without actually trying to look, then, you just kind of conform it to something. You don't want to actually see if it's true or not. You're conforming for something. It just sounds right to you. It just sounds better. It just sounds better that way. I don't want to hear about this crypto Moorish connection, Kurimeo. Why don't you stick to ancient America? Why don't you do a video about the Olmec, Kurimeo? Right? The ancient ones. Well, guess what? I'm working on a future video. It's going to be called the Out of Olmec Theory. The Out of Olmec Theory. So we're used to seeing this one phenotype for Olmecs. We're used to seeing this one phenotype. Did you guys know the historians don't even know who the Olmecs were, what language they spoke? They just generalize and calling them Olmec, Old Mexicans. The Olmec were a group of many different nations and tribes being grouped as one people. And they weren't the oldest. You're not going to leave behind the history of the mound builders. They're older than the Olmecs. And Caral Supe and a lot of civilizations in South America are older than the Olmecs. They were very advanced. It's not to take any credit from the Olmecs, but I'm just trying to let you know real history. Because a lot of people's starting point is the Olmecs. Just because. Hey, he looks like me, Kurimeo. That's guy, that's why we look like Kurimeo. You don't look like that, man. You may be half Kurimeo, but you got that European and so but the tables have turned. Am I the only one with European ancestry? Straight up. Anything you guys say, all this is going to be mainstream. All this is going to be mainstream soon. All this is going to be mainstream soon. And hopefully, instead of like regretting or feeling bad or trying to acknowledge it, be happy, be glad you have this deep history. You're knowing yourself more, truly knowing yourself, your people, your culture, how they ended up here, why you practice this, how did you get to the place you are today? From Virginia, Carolinas. What's the history behind these people? How did they own land? How were they free people of color? All right. So again, I hope you guys enjoyed the presentation. We're going to continue with this book. I don't know if in the next video, but at some point again, we're going to go into chapter 2. It's very good. I'll see if I pre-recorded. If not, if we can correlate what's in it with other images and other info. Sometimes it gets boring just reading one thing, right? Like, just listening to me read one thing. But this book is very interesting, luckily. All right. And it's telling us a lot of deep history. So, I just want you guys to understand that part as well. Not to make you any less Indian, if that's what anybody's thinking. No, that's definitely not what I'm trying to do. Just trying to really, we got to correct history. And if truth is telling us, you know, this is what it is. And when we find a whole book basically correlating the research and what we kind of already knew, right? We knew Moors ruled Europe, right? Who taught the so-called white man everything? I learned that from Moors, right? Who was the ancient navigators? Who taught them Freemasonry? Who did all that? I learned that from Moors. So what happened to all these so-called Moors of Europe? Did they just disappear or end up in North Africa only? No. We're reading about it right now. We're going to continue to read about it. It's major part of American history, major part of the early times of colonization of America. All right. But we're not going to forget who's the true Americans too, copper-colored tribes of America. Again, a lot of these people married into the Indians because they knew they were anciently related or some way connected. A lot of these colored people were coming back home, even though they were gone for about 500, 600, 1,000 years, whatever. They always knew what the promised land was. A lot of them wrote. Francis Bacon, I believe, wrote, gonna come. He was a Sephardic Jew, gonna come, blend in with the children of Abraham. That was their plan, the New Atlantis. Read his book, The New Atlantis. All right. Black, Indian, white, Negro, mulatto, colored. All these tags. But Abraham Lincoln was a so-called Negro. He wrote it himself in his autobiography. He said, I'm dark with coarse dark hair. I'm very dark skinned. Hamilton was a Sephardic Jew and a Huguenot. He was a Huguenot and a Sephardic Jew from the island of St. Croix. He had an aunt named Jemima. His aunt was called Jemima. He's like, that's Aunt Jemima. All right. So that was today's presentation. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm about to head to bed. Had a pretty long day. Traveled all the way. I was about 3 hours away. I just had to travel, get home, get ready for an interview with Mac. Shout out to Mac, Autonomous Party Group at Clubhouse. And I also wanted to finish part 2 because it really didn't go down right. I felt really weird just leaving it like that. I'm glad I was able to refresh today a little bit of that. We're going to dig into again W.D. Fard. Oh, yeah. Again, this is just history. We're just doing research, all right? We're not trying to go at anybody. I'm tired of hearing everybody's version of a false narrative, of false history with no sources. I'm done with all that. I'm going to do my own research. And I'm going to show you how I concluded my conclusions. How I got to my conclusions. Right? Salvador Fernandez Sarko, The Jews and Muslims in British Colonial America. All right, so thank you once again for tuning in. We're just gonna leave out with some music. Appreciate everybody in here. Thank you for all those who donated. Check out the Patreon if you enjoy this. And I have a lot of great books. I share a lot of great stuff there. I'm gonna share something tomorrow. An issue of Ancient American Magazine, issue number 4, which is really good. So go ahead and if you'd like to support, just know that you get something in return there. Actually, there's a lot of books there, including this one we're reading today. This is one of the books I've shared on my Patreon. All right, so make sure to go get it. Make sure to go get that. And much love and respect to Troy Johnson. Thank you, brother, for sharing your talent, your vision with the world. The world should know Troy Johnson. That's Francis Drake, ladies and gentlemen, the crypto Moorish Sephardic Jew. Francis Drake. Yo, DJ, rewind for me. Wow. Blessings, everybody. Pura vida, mi gente. Pura vida. We're gonna jam before we leave, all right? Vibrate. Wow.